Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The September sun filtered through the large windows of Vivienne Moreau's studio, illuminating the sketches scattered across her work table. Each line, each fold of fabric in her sketches told a story, one of sleepless nights, forgotten coffees, and hands aching from the meticulous work of detail. Vivienne, a French-American in her 30s, had inherited from her mother a keen sense of aesthetics and from her father an unwavering rigor. But beyond talent, what set her apart was her passion. She didn't just create clothes, she sculpted emotions, identities, and wearable dreams. This collection was unlike any other. It drew inspiration from the fusion of timeless Parisian elegance and the vibrant modernity of New York. From dresses with bold lines and perfectly tailored jackets to sculptural accessories, everything bore her unique signature. Vivienne knew this collection could change her career and cement her name in the cutthroat world of international fashion. Yet, beneath this apparent calm, an unseen danger loomed. Cassandra Lee, a rising and ambitious influencer, had recently begun frequenting the same fashion circles as Vivienne. Cassandra was attractive, charismatic, and well-connected in the media, but she sorely lacked personal creativity. And what Vivienne didn't yet know was that Cassandra was observing her every move, discreetly capturing the details of her sketches and prototypes. The fateful morning arrived. Vivienne, sipping her coffee on the balcony overlooking the Manhattan skyline, received a link from a fellow stylist. Cassandra's new collection had just been unveiled. Vivienne blinked in disbelief. Every dress, every jacket, every accessory was a carbon copy of her own designs. The details she had perfected for months were there, on display for all to see, but attributed to Cassandra. The shock made her heart race. How could anyone dare to copy her work with such audacity? Anger rose, but it was quickly tempered by fear. Part of Vivienne knew that, alone, she was powerless against Cassandra's media influence and popularity. She felt vulnerable, almost helpless. And yet, behind this fear, a fierce determination was beginning to take root. She would not abandon her name, her passion, or the fruits of her labor. Fortunately, she wasn't alone. David Leroy, her husband, was more than just a source of support. A renowned lawyer, a skilled strategist, and a deeply loyal man, David had always been her partner in life and in her ambitions. Seeing the worry and distress on Vivienne's face, he gently placed his hand on hers and whispered, "Don't worry, Vivienne. We'll show them who you really are. And no one can take away what belongs to you." At that precise moment, Vivienne felt a new strength surge through her. She knew that what lay ahead would be a fierce battle, a duel of creativity, truth, and justice. But she was no longer alone. Together, she and David were ready to expose the theft, reveal the authenticity of her talent, and restore her dignity in a world that sometimes valued image more than genuine genius. The curtain was about to rise, and Vivienne stood ready to write the first chapter of her revenge, with elegance, audacity, and truth. Vivienne's phone vibrated on the work table, breaking the studious silence of her workshop. She grabbed the screen and opened a link sent to her by a colleague, accompanied by a worried message. "Vivienne, look at this. Are these your creations?" Vivienne's heart leaped. She clicked, and her eyes fell upon the images from Cassandra Lee's latest presentation. Her hands trembled slightly. Every piece, every detail, every seam, everything seemed to have come directly from her sketches, her prototypes. Even the tiny original features she thought invisible were there, reproduced to perfection. Anger rose, burning and immediate. "How dare they?" she murmured to herself. But with the anger quickly came fear. Cassandra was a powerful media figure, followed by hundreds of thousands of subscribers, often acclaimed by influential critics. No one would suspect that Vivienne was the true creator. Vivienne stood up and took a few steps around the studio. The sketches she had carefully placed on her table seemed to mock her. She remembered the sleepless nights spent adjusting the folds of fabric, choosing each color, imagining the perfect silhouette. And now, all of that was being presented as someone else's success. A heavy silence settled in the room. Then, she heard the door slide open softly. David, her husband, entered, immediately noticing Vivian's expression. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice calm but alert. Vivian showed the phone, without daring to utter the word plagiarism. David took the device, examined the images and frowned. "These are your creations, exactly the same." "It's theft, Vivian." A mixture of emotions crossed Vivian's face: frustration, injustice, and a deep-seated fear for her reputation. "But, what can I do? She already has the visibility, the media are acclaiming her. Who will believe that I am the real creator?" she said, almost whispering, her voice trembling. David approached and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're going to prove it. Everything you've created, everything you've sketched, we have the evidence. Your notebooks, your dated sketches, the photos of your prototypes, we're going to show them the truth." A surge of determination coursed through Vivian. She knew the fight would be difficult, that the world could be cruel and unjust. But she was no longer alone. David would be her shield and her voice. Together, they would face Cassandra and the entire world if necessary. That night, Vivian didn't sleep. She spent the night gathering her sketches, photographing her prototypes, and preparing a plan. She knew she couldn't just cry foul, she had to act strategically, intelligently, and patiently. The battle had begun, and she was ready to do anything to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The following days were a mixture of anguish and intense reflection for Vivian. Every morning, she turned on her computer and reviewed Cassandra's collection. The pieces were staged with impeccable models in photogenic locations, accompanied by flattering comments on social media. Each post, each article seemed to reinforce the idea that Cassandra was the true designer. Vivian felt anger rising again, but she knew that giving in to impulsiveness would be a mistake. She needed a solid plan, an impeccable strategy. She remembered David's words: act intelligently. Show the truth, don't just cry injustice. That morning, she tried to contact Cassandra directly. She sent a polite but firm email, explaining that several of her creations had been reproduced without permission and requesting a private discussion to resolve the situation. Minutes passed. Hours. No response. Vivian's frustration mingled with a growing unease. Cassandra had not only copied her designs, but seemed determined to profit from this appropriation without acknowledging the original talent. Every new social media post from Cassandra, every interview where she boasted of her innovative inspiration, felt like a stab in Vivian's heart. "She'll never answer. She's playing a public game and you can't compete alone," David murmured, watching Vivian clench her fists in front of her screen. Vivian nodded. She knew he was right. The truth wouldn't be enough if it remained hidden behind her sketches. She had to make it public, but strategically. David then proposed an idea: to use his network of contacts in the fashion and legal worlds to document everything. Vivian's notebooks, photos of the prototypes, working files with creation dates, everything would be organized to prove the prior existence and authenticity of the creations. "If Cassandra refuses to cooperate, we will have everything we need to show the world who the true creator is," David explained, his gaze determined. Vivian felt a spark of hope. She began to compile evidence, write notes, and meticulously photograph each sketch. Every document, every image, every detail would become a piece of the puzzle to reveal the truth. But Cassandra's silence weighed heavily. Each lack of response added pressure, a cruel reminder that her adversary was cunning and aware of her media influence. Vivian knew the storm was approaching. She could feel it in the air, like a tense wind just waiting to erupt. And in that silence, Vivian made a decision: she would not be intimidated. She would confront Cassandra, not out of blind anger, but with all the precision and intelligence she could muster. The battle for her creation, her reputation, and her identity had only just begun. The day before a major fashion event in Manhattan, Vivian felt both nervous and determined. The threat of Cassandra still loomed, but this time she wasn't alone in this fight. David had begun mobilizing his contacts in the fashion and legal worlds, and a methodical plan was taking shape to uncover the truth. David had arranged a secret meeting in their Tribeca loft. The room, large and bright, was littered with files, computers, and sketchbooks. At the table, 2 intellectual property lawyers and a media consultant were reviewing the evidence. Vivian stood by the window, watching the city below, while listening intently to the recommendations. We compiled all the dates, original sketches, photographed prototypes, and exchanged emails, David explained, pointing to a graph on his computer. Each piece proves that Vivian is the original designer. Cassandra has no legal justification. One of the lawyers nodded. With this evidence, we can not only take legal action, but also prepare a powerful press conference. The media will not be able to ignore the truth. Vivian felt a newfound confidence fill her heart. She had always feared that her talent would be stolen and appropriated by someone else, but now every detail was meticulously documented. Fear was gradually giving way to the energy of revenge. David turned to her and said with a reassuring smile, "You are not fighting alone. We will expose Cassandra for who she is. And the world will know who the true creator is." The gala evening was approaching, and Cassandra was being touted as the rising star of fashion. Vivian's team had prepared a strategy: capture Cassandra's presentation, publish irrefutable evidence, and control the media narrative to ensure the truth came out. As Vivian prepared her documents and sketches, she realized that this wasn't just a fight for her creations, but for her dignity, her reputation, and her passion. Each stolen drawing represented months of hard work, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. This time, she wouldn't let anyone else take credit for them. "We are ready," David murmured, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's time to show the world the truth." Vivian took a deep breath and felt a surge of determination run through her body. The storm was approaching, but this time she was ready to face it, armed with evidence, strategy, and the unwavering support of her husband. The confrontation with Cassandra and the fashion world was about to begin. The gala evening was in full swing at a prestigious Manhattan hotel. Crystal chandeliers reflected a warm light onto the elegantly dressed guests, and the murmur of conversations mingled with the clicks of cameras created an electric atmosphere. Vivian entered, accompanied by David, wearing a simple yet elegant dress that hinted at her inner strength rather than seeking to impress. In the distance, Cassandra Lee shone under the spotlights. Her confident smile and charming demeanor betrayed a calculated arrogance. Every guest seemed captivated by her, admiring what they believed to be her talent. Vivian felt a surge of anger, but she channeled it. Tonight, she would not react impulsively, she had to remain strategic. David whispered in his ear, "Stay calm, observe her, and wait for the moment. We have the evidence. Everything must be controlled." As Vivian walked among the guests, Cassandra noticed her. A condescending smile stretched across her lips. "Ah, Vivian, what a surprise to see you here," she said in a sweet but icy tone. "Do you like the presentation of my collection?" Vivian replied calmly and precisely, each word chosen to show her confidence. "Yes, I saw it, very carefully. Very similar to what I've created these past few months." Cassandra frowned slightly, but kept her smile. "Oh, really? I didn't know you had collections in the works." A murmur rippled through the guests who had overheard the exchange. The tension rose a notch. Vivian felt the energy in the room shift. Curious glances began to fall upon them. David then intervened, calmly but authoritatively. "Vivian has never hidden her creations. And unlike some dubious practices, she can prove the originality of her work. Every sketch, every prototype, every idea was developed by her and her alone." Cassandra paled almost imperceptibly, aware that the situation was slipping out of her control. She tried to regain the initiative. "Well, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Fashion is inspired by others, after all." Vivian smiled slightly, but her gaze was firm and sharp. "Coincidence doesn't explain the exact appropriation of unique patterns, lines, and details. What you present as your inspiration is actually my work." At that moment, several journalists and influencers began filming the scene. The cameras captured the confrontation. The guests, intrigued, whispered amongst themselves, and the atmosphere became electric. Cassandra then understood that this conflict would not remain private and that her reputation was at risk. Vivian, feeling David's silent support behind her, knew she had just crossed a threshold. She would no longer simply endure it. She would confront the plagiarism publicly, reveal the truth, and reclaim what was rightfully hers. The storm she had foreseen was now raging in the heart of the evening, and the whole world would soon witness it. The next morning, Vivian and David arrived at a large Manhattan hotel that had been transformed into a conference room for the occasion. Journalists, photographers, and influencers had already gathered in the room, their cameras trained on the stage. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of excitement and curiosity. David took Vivian by the hand, offering her a reassuring smile. "Remember, everything is in place. The evidence is irrefutable. You are ready." Vivian nodded. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform, facing a sea of eyes and cameras. Her sketches, photos of prototypes, and dated files were neatly arranged on a lectern beside her. Every detail was there to tell the truth. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear and confident. "I am here today to talk about a problem that affects many creators, plagiarism and the appropriation of our work." Flashes popped. Journalists feverishly took notes. Vivian continued, showing her original sketches, the photographed prototypes, and the dates of creation. "Every piece you see here was designed, developed, and tested by me over a period of 2 years. And yet, some of these creations have been publicly presented by someone else, without any credit for my work." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. Murmurs began to spread among the journalists and influencers present. David, standing beside him, added, "We have gathered all the necessary evidence to demonstrate that the plagiarism accusations are not only founded, they are irrefutable. This press conference aims to restore the truth and protect the original work of the creators." Vivian then presented a side-by-side comparison, the original sketches from her collection and the images of the pieces presented by Cassandra. The evidence was striking. The details, the patterns, the cuts, everything matched perfectly. The audience remained silent, stunned by the clarity and precision of the demonstration. "Creativity is not a concept to be taken lightly," concluded Vivian, her voice filled with firmness and emotion, "and today, I am simply asking for respect and recognition for my work." Journalists rushed in to ask questions. Cameras filmed every gesture, every glance, every piece of evidence presented. Social media erupted minutes later, with messages of support multiplying and criticism of Cassandra going viral. At that moment, Vivian understood that the battle had turned. For the first time since the discovery of the theft, she felt the tide of injustice shifting. She was no longer a silent victim, she had become a powerful voice, supported by evidence, the truth, and a husband ready to do anything to defend her talent. No sooner had the press conference ended than social media erupted. Images of Vivian's original sketches side by side with Cassandra's pieces spread like wildfire within minutes. The hashtags #VivianMoreau, #AuthenticDesigner, and #FashionPlagiarism went viral, while supportive comments poured in from all sides. Fashion critics, usually neutral, weighed in. On specialized blogs and online magazines, articles praised Vivian's precision, boldness, and innovation, while also highlighting the extent of the plagiarism. Influencers posted comparison videos, exposing the theft of inspiration and congratulating Vivian for her dignity and courage. Meanwhile, Cassandra, broadcasting live from her hotel suite, watched helplessly as the criticism mounted and the evidence went viral. She attempted to release a statement, downplaying the matter and referring to unintentional similarities, but her apologies were now ignored by internet users and the media. Every post on her social media was flooded with comments denouncing the plagiarism. David, who was monitoring the situation with Vivian, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Look, the public is with you. They see what we knew from the beginning, your talent is real and unique. She won't be able to manipulate public opinion anymore." Vivian felt a wave of relief mixed with pride. All her work, patience, and determination were finally beginning to pay off. The fear and anxiety that had plagued her since the discovery of the plagiarism had transformed into strength and confidence. But she also knew the battle wasn't over yet. Cassandra, wounded in her ego and reputation, would likely seek to retaliate. Vivian had to remain vigilant, ready to defend her creation and protect her name. Throughout the day, prestigious fashion houses and journalists approached Vivian, eager to collaborate, interview her, and showcase her talent to the world. The young designer felt that this painful experience had actually opened doors she never could have imagined. Cassandra, meanwhile, saw her image deteriorate as the evidence and testimonies mounted. For the first time, she was on the defensive, facing a calm, strategic, and determined adversary. The tide had turned, and power now lay in the hands of Vivian and David. That day marked a turning point. The stolen artist had become a powerful voice, supported by the truth, and the world was finally beginning to recognize her talent. Vivian understood that, sometimes, justice resided not only in the courts, but also in the strength of a truth brought to light. A few days after the press conference, Vivian and David found themselves in the hushed office of a prestigious law firm specializing in intellectual property. Stacks of files, digital documents, and sketchbooks formed a veritable arsenal. This time, the battle was no longer in the media, it had entered the legal arena. "We have everything prepared," explained one of the lawyers, leafing through the documents. "Every creation date, every prototype, every communication proves that the creations are Vivian's work. Cassandra will have no room for maneuver in court." David, impassive but determined, nodded his head. "Perfect. We will initiate proceedings for copyright infringement and plagiarism. Cassandra may try to deny it, but she will be cornered by the clarity of the evidence." Vivian felt a mixture of apprehension and relief. The legal confrontation was intimidating, but she knew that this time, her talent and her work would be protected. A few days later, Cassandra received a formal subpoena. The effect was immediate. For the first time since the beginning of the case, she appeared vulnerable. Her public relations team tried to quell the shockwave, but journalists and influencers remained focused on the evidence presented at the conference. At the initial preliminary hearing, Vivian's lawyer presented the documents and evidence. The judge meticulously examined the dates, photographs, and sketches. Each piece of evidence reinforced the argument that Cassandra had reproduced Vivian's work without permission. Cassandra tried to downplay the situation, claiming that some similarities could be the result of chance or shared inspiration. But the rigor and clarity of the evidence left little room for argument. Her lawyer attempted delaying tactics, but the judge seemed to favor Vivian, impressed by the organization, detail, and transparency of the case. "Your Honor," David declared confidently, "this is not just a legal issue, it is a matter of respect for the work and talent of a designer. The evidence is indisputable. Every piece presented by Ms. Lee corresponds exactly to Ms. Moreau's original designs." Vivian, sitting beside him, felt a surge of power and relief. Finally, after weeks of stress, fear, and uncertainty, she saw justice on her side. Cassandra, on the other hand, was beginning to realize that her reputation and credibility were severely damaged. The legal battle was far from over, but a turning point had just been reached. Vivian had proven that she could defend herself, not only through truth and evidence, but also thanks to David's strength and unwavering support. Victory, though gradual, was now within reach. The courtroom was packed that day. Journalists had turned out in droves, aware that the case had taken on national significance. Cassandra, nervous, watched the cameras and the stares fixed upon her. Every whisper and every click of a camera heightened her tension. David stood up and, calmly but resolutely, addressed the judge and the audience. "Your Honor, before continuing the procedure, it is important to clarify an element that demonstrates not only the authenticity of Ms. Moreau's work, but also her legitimacy in the world of international fashion." Vivian felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew what David was going to reveal, and the power of that information would shake Cassandra to her core. Ms. Moreau is not only a talented designer. She comes from an influential family in the art world, renowned for its innovation and role in the industry for generations. Vivian's creations are part of a legacy of rigor, creativity, and professional recognition. A murmur rippled through the room. The journalists exchanged surprised glances, and Cassandra paled slightly. She never would have imagined that Vivian possessed such symbolic and professional support. David continued, projecting documents and press articles tracing the artistic career of Vivian's family, as well as letters from renowned creators attesting to her talent and legitimacy. Everything we are presenting today confirms that Ms. Moreau is the original creator and that any appropriation of her work by Ms. Lee is not only illegal, but also morally reprehensible. Vivian, standing beside David, felt a mixture of emotion and pride. The strength and support of her family, even if symbolic, had transformed this battle into a demonstration of power, truth, and justice. Cassandra tried to reply, but her trembling voice betrayed her panic. I didn't know. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Journalists frantically took notes and captured images. The pressure on Cassandra was immense. Her already tarnished public image was beginning to crack irreparably. At that precise moment, Vivian realized the magnitude of her victory. It was no longer simply a matter of rights or creation, it was a triumph over injustice, deceit, and Cassandra's arrogance. The truth was out in the open, and the world could no longer ignore who the true creator was. The storm she had feared was no longer against her, it had been transformed into a wind carrying justice, recognition, and personal triumph. The day of the final judgment had arrived. The courtroom was packed, cameras focused on Vivian and Cassandra. The tension in the air was palpable. This was the moment when all the evidence, all the strategies, and all the determination would pay off. David stood at her side, confident and serene, while Vivian calmly observed the judge. Her weeks of preparation, her patience, and her perseverance were finally about to be rewarded. The judge, a man with a piercing but fair gaze, spoke. After reviewing the evidence, original sketches, prototypes, and dated communications, it is clear that Ms. Moreau is the original creator of the pieces presented by Ms. Lee. Any unauthorized use of these creations constitutes an act of intellectual property infringement and plagiarism. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the room. The journalists frantically jotted down every word. Cassandra, pale, could only stare at the floor. Consequently, Ms. Lee is required to immediately withdraw all disputed creations, cease all public presentation of these pieces, and pay damages to Ms. Moreau for the unauthorized use of her work. Vivian felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. The victory wasn't just legal, it was public recognition of her talent and authenticity. She took a deep breath, a radiant smile lighting up her face, as David proudly shook her hand. Outside the courthouse, the press and passers-by cheered Vivian. Interviews followed one after another. Journalists asked her about her feelings, her future projects, and her advice to creators who had been victims of plagiarism. Vivian responded with grace and confidence. This victory is not just for me, but for all creators whose work deserves to be respected. The truth always triumphs in the end. Social media exploded again. Messages of support, admiration, and congratulations poured in. Major fashion houses offered collaborations, renowned designers wanted to work with her, and her name became synonymous with talent and integrity. Cassandra, meanwhile, faced a dramatic fall in her reputation. Her public apologies, attempts at justification, and media attention were no longer enough to convince the public. Her career had just suffered an irreversible blow. Vivian, for her part, finally saw the horizon brightening. Her creativity was protected, her reputation restored, and her passion recognized. But beyond the material and professional victory, she felt a deeper satisfaction, that of having defended the truth, her identity, and her integrity, with David's unwavering support. The fight was over, but the lesson remained: perseverance, courage, and truth always triumph in the end. A few months after her legal victory, Vivian stood in her new, spacious, and light-filled studio overlooking Manhattan. The walls were covered with sketches, prototypes, and photographs of the collections she had created. But this time, it wasn't just a workspace, it was a symbol of her success, her perseverance, and her integrity. The press continued to take an interest in her, but this time with admiration and respect. Collaborations with major fashion houses and international designers poured in. Vivian had acquired not only fame, but also an undisputed position in the fashion world, based on her talent and creativity. David, standing beside him, watched the scene with pride. "Look at everything you have accomplished," he said, smiling. "Everything you worked for, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, all of that has been recognized." Vivian smiled, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and gratitude. "I could never have done it without you, David. Without your support, your strategy, and your confidence, I might never have found the courage to defend myself." That evening, a reception was held to celebrate her first entirely original collection since the affair with Cassandra. Prestigious guests, journalists, and influencers flocked to admire her creations, all bearing the mark of her artistic genius. Applause and compliments echoed through the room, confirming that truth and talent had triumphed. Vivian then recalled the journey she had undertaken, the discovery of the plagiarism, the anger, the fear, the sleepless nights spent gathering evidence, the press conference, the court appearance. Each step had strengthened her resolve and her identity as a creator. She understood that the true victory was not only recovering her work, but showing that talent and integrity are always ultimately recognized. As the evening drew to a close, Vivian raised her glass, surrounded by David and her loved ones. To creativity, truth, and the courage to stand up for oneself. And above all, to those who never stop believing in themselves. The guests applauded, and Vivian knew that a new chapter of her life was beginning, a chapter of success, creative freedom, and well-deserved respect. The fashion world had just discovered a force that was both talented and indomitable. And Vivian, now fully recognized, stood ready to create, inspire, and conquer with elegance and audacity. The storm had been weathered, justice had been served, and the creator had found her triumph.